Now, we're joined now from South Carolina with Mr. Justin Thomas Russell, Executive Director of the Global Foreign Policy Center, to unpack what is at stake in the US-China chip debate. Mr. Russell, good evening to you. And let me here start by asking you, how does the chip blockade debate reflect Washington's competing security and commercial interests?
Well, good to be with you as always, Mona. The idea of a chip blockade is playing with economic diplomacy, and it's a really risky strategy on both sides. If you look at the fact that China has put invested a lot into Huawei, which is its big AI-based chip manufacturer, big tech company. If they're trying to get into a head-to-head economic diplomatic war between Huawei and Nvidia, and now with the new deals that were announced just within the past 24 hours from Nvidia and the U.S. government, it could very well potentially create a tech war that could hinder future development on either side. Because right now, as it stands, China kind of relies on it for their AI advances. They rely on American chips that they've acquired previous to the current tensions. And quite frankly, US companies are relying on everything from rare earth minerals to inexpensive technological components to build their large AI infrastructure. It's a very interconnected fight that we're getting involved with between Beijing and Washington on this subject.
What, Mr. Russell, can you describe Lutnick's controlled sales strategy as sustainable or just a temporary truce in a wider tech war?
I really can't explain it. Look, Howard Lutnick is taking moves that he believes are in the best interest of the U.S. economy, of the U.S. government, and U.S. strategy as far as an economic capacity. The logic of getting into a technology ceasefire, which this could possibly do, does it give the advantage to the Chinese as far as them being able to provide inexpensive technology to the American consumer market that is going to put pressure on US-based technology companies? And then there's also the problem is there a possibility that China does what it's done for decades as far as being able to either reverse engineer or even kind of copycat the technology, be able to do it cheaper, more effective, more efficiently than US production, and then give it a competitive advantage on the global market. Again, when we get into a ceasefire, is this going to prevent Beijing and the Chinese high-tech industry from doing what it's done in the past? Everything from pirating technology to basically taking our hindrances, using it against us, and gaining, kind of an edge over U.S. technology in the global community.
Now, how do you think Beijing would retaliate, or how would Beijing retaliate from your point of view if Washington imposes an outright ban on AI chips and equipment?
Well, I think the retaliation from Beijing is it's going to continue to, it can do everything from flood the market with the chips that they already have the capacity to produce and flood the market with less expensive alternatives to American technology. I mean, if you're a private company and you're looking to make profits, you're going to, reduce costs, and those costs could be reduced by cheaper Chinese technology. What this does on a much more global aspect is if the U.S. does impose this Chinese chip blockade, what this is going to do is that is going to kind of push the global market into looking at the BRICS and the SCO as an alternative trading partner venue. Uh, this basically kind of provides the justification for the push of BRICS in the global market. This has been a concern, or if it's not, it should be a concern for Howard Lutnick. India produces a lot of items and goods that are used in the completion of technology systems. China builds these systems very effectively and very inexpensively. The U.S. bottom line can't compete with that kind of either subsidized or low-cost production. It's just not built into the U.S. economic model.
So, from your point of view, do you think here that restrictions would accelerate China's domestic semiconductor push rather than contain it?
I'm sorry, I want to ask that question again.
Right, again, from your point of view, do you think that those restrictions could accelerate China's domestic semiconductor push rather than contain the matter?
Well, I think it's unclear. There's a lot of developing movements that are happening right now. For example, Trump is talking to President Xi, or if he hasn't, if he isn't right now, he has already spoken to President Xi. The key here is what's going to occur at the APEC meeting, if it does happen, between Xi and Trump. This is going to be a very, very key sticking point, or it could be a very, very key development in kind of releasing some of the tension between Beijing and Washington, particularly when it comes to trade and particularly when it comes to the high-end chip market. Look, when we talk about this, how does Lenovo, which was originally IBM Personal Computers, that was an IBM, an American company that was bought by China, and Lenovo has a good share of the computing market, particularly in the area of laptops, tablets, in the global economy. Can the U.S. compete with a Lenovo model? You're talking about putting an American company like Dell or HP up against a Lenovo or a Huawei. They do it cheaper. They do it at much bigger capacity. Can we compete? I think what happens in the discussions at the highest level between Xi and Trump is going to trickle down, and that could be a factor of how we see this chip war play out in the end.
So what role do allies such as Japan, for instance, or the Netherlands can play in keeping controls effective?
Well, it's going to be difficult for them. I mean, because again, if you are the head of state in the Netherlands or in Japan, you're trying to keep costs down for your consumer base. If you are going to put in restrictions that kind of hinders the ability of your people to buy, cost-effective electronics, if you're a business, a high-tech business that relies on these chips and these server decks and the equipment that goes into computer rooms and data centers, you're going to need economic justification in order to put a blockade on either Chinese or, perhaps even U.S. goods, depending on the country. You're going to have a hard time putting those controls in place and hinder the ability to have these businesses maximize their spending. Again, this is a brand new world that we're dealing with, and the fact that we're seeing even the U.S. acquired positions and investments in some of these companies, as we saw with AMD, as we saw with Intel recently. Again, this is brand new charted territory. It could, one could say that this is almost privatized socialism that we're seeing coming out of here in the United States.
Now, how does the chip fight add into the broader US-China rivalry on the AI, on the quantum, on the strategic minerals? And there is a kind of risk of undermining US firms like NVIDIA, as you said, AMD, others, if they lose access to China's vast market?
Well, Mona, that's the big concern that everybody talks about inside the foreign relations circles. This goes back to a much broader concept that we here at the Global Foreign Policy Center have been pushing, is this idea of mutually assured economic destruction. This is another instance where we see that, because the logistics, the economic ties, the trade ties are so interwoven with each other between Washington and Beijing, the US and China, the just-in-time logistics, the tech requirements that are needed to produce the larger scale consumables or tech products. Beijing and Washington have to be very careful that they don't get into a crossfire of technological blockades or technological restraints, or withholding technology products, because one is going to affect the other, and if they start taking out each other, then the ripple effect into the other global markets could ripple into the EU, into other aspects of Asia. This is a very, very it's a very delicate game of diplomatic and economic chess that's going on between Beijing and Washington.
Right. So finally here, Mr. Russell, can technology interdependence act as a stabilizer or a destabilizer in tense geopolitical relations?
It can, again, when we talk about diplomacy, there's one side and then there's the other, and somewhere in the middle is what's going to happen. Yes, this could be either a great stabilizer, and this could kind of reduce the heat that's been growing between Beijing and Washington, or this could just be another element to exacerbate the ongoing trade conflict between the US and China. Where this gets a little bit complicated is the fact that the US has invested money and taken an investment position in these tech companies. Again, most notably, Intel. The announcement yesterday that NVIDIA and Intel, at the behest of the White House, there's many economists that look at this and saying that this is almost socialism. This is almost communist. This is the type of subsidized industry that the Trump administration and the U.S. government for decades has been saying is exactly what the problem is in why the U.S. is not competitive. We're just now coming around to the idea that maybe subsidized industries, what we criticize Scandinavia and Asia for shipbuilding, we're about to do inside the tech and chip business. So yes, this could either exacerbate it, it could either backfire, it could possibly settle some of these conflicts. But at the end of the day, we're not going to know until we see the end effects, and the end effects are going to be the economic effects.